Welcome, everyone. Feel free to find a seat. There's some seating overflow in the garden room here. We're live streaming it, so you can see from this space. And back there? Are you asking a question? So yes, plenty of seating. So welcome, everyone. My name's Ginger Schulich Porcella. I'm the executive director here at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. On behalf of all the staff and board at the MA, I want to give you an extremely warm welcome. I've been at the MA just 5 short months, but it's become very clear that the work that we do would not be possible without the steadfast support of the Humanities Institute. The museum benefits significantly from the support of our Humanities Excel Fellows who work alongside our staff in education, exhibitions, and archives, gaining hands-on professional experience working in a museum. The first Night at the Museum event was actually May 2016 when we organized a panel on history and newspapers in conversation with the Kinsey Collection of African American art at the MA. And since then, we've deepened the relationship and collaborated on several important projects over the last decade. Because of THI sponsorship, we're able to present critical, thought-provoking exhibitions that speak to our diverse audiences, including our current exhibition, Threads of Love, the AIDS Memorial Quilt, which is on display now in the Solari Gallery. And of course, this program tonight, Amending Worlds, which I encourage everyone to explore after the speaking portion. And I just want to thank each and every one of you here tonight for being here, because this is your museum and you really make us what we are. So now I'd like to introduce the MA's incoming board chair and your Dean of Humanities, Jasmine Allender.
Good evening. How are you doing? Good. As Ginger said, I have the pleasure of serving as Dean of Humanities at UC Santa Cruz, which includes the Humanities Institute. And I also wear a second hat tonight as a current MA board member and the incoming board chair. And I want to thank Ginger for taking on the role of executive director. I'm really excited to work more closely with her. And I want to thank the whole staff at the MA for hosting this annual THI event. The Night at the Museum, as you heard, was created almost 10 years ago, and it fosters dialogue between humanists at UCSC and the broader Santa Cruz public to invite that public to think with us as humanists who are dedicated to research and ideas that are at their most vibrant when they are considered in community. We do that through the powerful medium of museum exhibitions, which encourage people to cultivate deeply humanistic skills. At a time when the intellectual and financial support for museums is under unprecedented attack, as is also the case for institutions of public higher education, from the very institutions charged with supporting us, humanists at UCSC are proud and grateful to stand with our colleagues here at the MA in the study and exploration of the human experience. This year's Night at the Museum features Amending Worlds. I can think of some worlds that need amending right now. It's a panel discussion about speculative fiction and a multimedia exhibition by UCSC graduate and undergraduate students and alumni winners of the Koha Gunderson Prize in Speculative Futures. My special thanks to Jim Gunderson and Peter Koha for funding the award and co-sponsoring the event tonight. And I want to personally thank each and every one of you for coming out on this Thursday evening to demonstrate the importance of museums for the cultural and civic life of our community. Now is not the time to take any of this for granted. Now is the time to affirm that strong democracies need cultural and educational institutions that are deeply embedded in our communities and dedicated to creating inclusive spaces for the creation of knowledge. This is THI's 7th Night at the Museum, and it's also the final event in THI's calendar for this year. It was a big year for the Humanities Institute. It turned 25. Over the past 2 decades, THI has grown from a space to support humanistic scholars into a multi-pronged center that supports not just individual scholars, but also larger research projects and community engagement, including annual events like this and the Deep Read. This year's Deep Read involved 11,000 people. How many of you were deep readers? Great to see you again. 11,000 people all collectively reading Percival Everett's James, which this year won the Pulitzer Prize the day after Everett's Deep Read Conversation in the Quarry. We now call it the Deep Read Bump. THI's impact in the community has not gone unnoticed, and I would like to invite Lisette Jones, field representative from State Assembly member Gail Pellerin's office, who is here to present a certificate of recognition.
Good evening, everyone. Assemblymember Pellerin regrets that she could not be here this evening, but as the Assemblymember representing the 28th District, which we're in, and the chair of the UC Legislative Roundtable, she wanted me to present this certificate to the Humanities Institute on their 25th anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll be back at the end of the event.
Okay, now I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening's discussion, Professor Carla Freccero. Woo! Carla is Distinguished Professor of Literature and the History of Consciousness and affiliated faculty in Feminist Studies at UCSC. Her capacious body of work includes early modern European literature and history, critical theory, feminist and queer theories, psychoanalysis, and animal studies. Her books include Father Figures, Popular Culture, Queer Early Modern, and edited work including Pre-Modern Sexualities and Species, Race, Sex. Her current book project on non-human animals and figuration is titled Animate Figures. Carla?
Whoa. Tricky stairs there. Oh yeah, the mic thing. Thank you, Jasmine. I'm mostly here because I'm principal investigator for the Koha Gunderson Prize Competition and Creativity Workshop. This event's happening in conjunction with Amending Worlds, an exhibition put on by the winners of the Koha Gunderson Prize in Speculative Fictions, who also formed a creativity workshop last quarter to think about and develop their works. Amending Worlds, and this with a nod to what Jasmine said about it, acknowledges efforts, however imperfect and incomplete, to repair what's broken about the world, and thereby change, modify, amend it. And you can find the projects throughout the museum, all 3 floors, by following the yellow arrows, if you can see them, and the numbers on the ground. There are 9. And you can also consult the brochures, which are on stands scattered throughout the museum. And this year, we're really delighted that the MA and THI have coordinated the exhibition with Night at the Museum, featuring this panel of artists, creators. Maybe you guys should come up and sit down so I can say this. This panel of artists, creators, and critics who will be speaking tonight. And I'm not going to go through all the thank yous now in the interest of time. And the complete list is on the brochure on the back page. But I do want to thank Peter Koha and James Gunderson, UCSC alums who had the great idea years ago to sponsor this competition and then supported its development into something bigger. I also want to acknowledge the students, graduate and undergraduate, who helped in the background to make this exhibition possible. Matthew Pulsine. It's the only time I've ever said his last name. And Valerie Saints. Finally, we couldn't have done this without Natalie Jenkins, the exhibitions manager here at the MA, who was here working tirelessly to troubleshoot, construct, counsel, and hold our hands with generosity, kindness, and above all, skill throughout this process. Our speakers this evening will be addressing the question of speculative imagining, past, present, and future, how it gets into their work, and why it might be an important dimension of thought and feeling to keep alive. And then hopefully they'll share some of that thought as it takes shape in their creative work. The speculative, as we're using it here, is sometimes science fiction, sometimes fantasy, but sometimes also an alternative way of imagining both the past and the present. It is offered sometimes in the spirit of yearning for a different way of being, sometimes as a way to mend what seems to be so broken, and sometimes as a gesture of hope, an opening toward a different way to move forward into the future. After they speak, time allowing, I may pose a few questions inspired by their talks and by the collaborators in the creativity workshop, and then we'll open the discussion to the floor for comments and questions. And we're gonna have a mic over there, a mic on a stand, so when you have questions, you can line up, and you can line up outside the door so you don't, so we don't get too crowded in here, which we already are. Okay, our first speaker, Micah Perks, I'm gonna read everybody's bio before they speak, in a row. Micah Perks is the author of a short story collection, True Love and Other Means of Miraculous Escape, a memoir, Pagan Time, and 2 novels, We Are Gathered Here and What Becomes Us. What Becomes Us, a story narrated by twin fetuses, won an independent publisher's gold medal and was named one of the top 10 books about the apocalypse by The Guardian. She has won a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. I feel like we need a moment of silence to mourn the NEA. The New Guard Machigan Fiction Prize, multiple residencies at the Blue Mountain Center at MacDowell, and will be spending the fall at the Tacht Artist Residency in Berlin. She's a professor of literature and creative writing at UCSC, where she's taught courses such as Women and the Apocalypse and U.S. Feminist Utopias. You can find her virtually at micahperks.com. Cathy Thomas is an assistant professor of English and creative writing at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She calls herself a feral academic who works at the intersection of the Black fantastic and Black feminist thought, which is why she researches and participates in cosplay and Caribbean carnival masquerade. Her current projects include a speculative fiction novel, Poco Mas, that imagines the disappearance of the Caribbean. A slipstream novel, Girls on Film, explores a mother-daughter alien relationship across time and the silver screen. And an academic book that examines the anxiety Black women create when they take up space at work, at play, in private, and even on reality TV. She's a founding member of AutonomousFutures.ai, a network of scholars and artists reimagining their relationship with emerging technologies and AI. She's also making experimental shoes that will be featured in a 2028 museum exhibit in Colorado. She's happy to be here. Kim Tallbear, Sisseton Wapeton Oyate, a Dakota Nation in South Dakota, is professor and Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Indigenous Peoples, Technoscience, and Society in the Faculty of Native Studies at the University of Alberta. She's the author of Native American DNA, Tribal Belonging and the False Promise of Genetic Science. She earned her PhD in 2005 from UCSC's History of Consciousness program, where she was co-supervised by Professors James Clifford and Donna Haraway. In addition to studying genome science and other settler disruptions to tribal self-definitions, Dr. Tallbear studies colonial disruptions to tribal sexual relations. She's increasingly allergic to the term indigenous. Dr. Tallbear is a regular media commentator on the range of topics she studies in outlets including the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, CNN, CBC, the Aboriginal People's Television Network, and the Rolling Stone. And you can follow Kim Tallbear on Blue Sky and her newsletter Unsettle on Substack. Please join me in welcoming these three panelists.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to start, I have a few remarks to make, but I wanted to start talking a little bit about one of the great honors, maybe the great honor of my life, which has been to work with students. And I wanted to talk about the hope that it gives me every day to I've been teaching a class, undergrad GE, with 200 students. It's called Children's Literature. And every day when I go in there on Monday and Wednesday, I am reminded about the hope for the future. And in this audience are graduate students that I've had the pleasure to work with that also give me hope. And sitting right next to me is my former grad student, Cathy Thomas, my forever student who always gives me hope, and you'll see why. So I wanted to start with that, and I also wanted to say that I've only just started to explore this show, but the students for the Coho Gunderson installation have also given me that same electric frisson of hope that I get when I'm teaching, and I hope you'll all go and look at the work. And I wanted to actually start my comments with a prayer that is part of Tyler Ray's Palestinian Seed Project that is right here in the show. So I'm going to read a little bit of this prayer and then get started. Ya Allah, O God, grant all people present here light, and to the seeds, the earth, make light come from us, through us, and all around us. To all the people, to those seeds, to the plants, the animals, the birds, the earth, the water, and the skies, please bless our efforts. Okay. Yeah, I didn't write it. So I have a few notes here. It's called On Imagining Ambiguous Utopias after Ursula Le Guin, and it's based in part on something I wrote for THI's Imagination series, but amended for this audience. Maybe it's the beginning of the end. Is that what you're thinking? Because sometimes that's what I'm thinking. But in the company with others, both past and present, I'm trying to imagine another way forwards and backwards. Maurice Sendak's deepest fear as a child was that he would be kidnapped like the Lindbergh baby was kidnapped. So when he grew up, he amended the past. In his book, picture book, Outside Over There, a fierce little girl saves her baby sister from a goblin kidnapping. My daughter has a tattoo of lupins with the Hebrew words Tikkun Olam above it. The lupins for the children's book, Miss Rumphius, in which a woman scatters lupin seeds everywhere she goes. Tikkun Olam is the Jewish concept that the world is broken, and it is each person's job to mend it a little before they leave. Her tattoo is a reminder to keep amending the present. In his memoir, C.S. Lewis describes his first experience of joy when, as a very young child, he saw a miniature garden constructed by thanks, Cathy, constructed by his older brother. Let me just find where I am. He describes his feeling upon gazing on that tiny world as closest to Milton's enormous bliss of Eden. I can imagine C.S. Lewis's secret garden, how pleasing in its tiny containment. Oops. She's always doing this for me. As Ursula Le Guin writes, utopias are most often, quote, sites of maximum control, worlds imagined around rules, isolated, protected by walls. The Hebrew word for holy means separated, cut off. Maybe that's why utopian literature is often so boring. As David Byrne sings, heaven is a place where nothing ever happens. Utopia is a Greek word coined by Thomas More in the 16th century, meaning no place. But no one really knows if Thomas More's utopia was a joke or if he was imagining in earnest. For example, in his utopia, they executed adulterers after the second offense. One was okay. Some people think he actually meant to write utopia, EU, which means good place, and is pronounced the same way, and by mistake spelled it utopia, no place. That's something I would do. Moore's Island utopia is pretty brutal, but not as brutal as 16th century England, where Moore purportedly tortured Protestants and was later beheaded by Henry VIII. Everybody loves a dystopia, except me. Dystopias are the negative Nellies of the speculative fiction world. The organizing principle of dystopian fiction is that the imagined world is worse than our own. Dystopias risk giving us the feeling that wherever we find ourselves is not as bad as the imagined dystopia we're reading about. So we close the book feeling pacified. Maybe that's why they're so popular. It makes our world the happy ending. I think I stole this idea from Darko Suvin. Imagining apocalypses, on the other hand, is fun because they're childish wish fulfillments. Fast track to utopia, erase everything, and start over. Earthquakes, zombies, alien invasion, plagues, automatic do-over, at least for the very few who survive. I'm interested in the original meaning of apocalypse as revelation, as radical transformation, and on utopic visions and experiences within and after apocalypse. Although many utopias are imagined as impossibly static cultures, I follow Ursula Le Guin, who wrote that utopia is, quotes, process, not stasis. I imagine communities that form and reform and dissolve around dreams of symbiotic perfection. The original subtitle of Ursula Le Guin's novel, The Dispossessed, is An Ambiguous Utopia. I like the introduction of ambiguity when imagining utopias, as in inexact. Utopias that are possibly better, that are in process, but are not perfect nowheres. I've written about the ambiguous utopian commune I grew up on and about an ambiguous utopian 19th century all-woman Shaker community. What is the relationship between the utopias we write about and the world we actually live in? California is named after an island in a 16th century novel, The Adventures of Esplandian, a utopian island of Black women ruled by the warrior queen Calafia. Real-life utopias can be dangerous. Nazis, Stalinists, make America great again. I've written about the Puritan utopia that led to King Philip's War, the most violent conflagration ever fought on this land, and I've written about the online community that is next door. Alanis Morissette's song Utopia, quote, "We'd gather around all in a room, fasten our belts, engage in dialogue. We'd all slow down, rest without guilt, not lie without fear, disagree sans jugement. That's what I'm talking about in terms of the danger of utopias boring us to death. Utopianists are smirked at by some for their unwillingness to see the world as it is. Rose-colored glasses is a metaphor for not seeing clearly. That's a little short-sighted. Every utopia is a critique of the world as it is. I've just finished a novel called The Wood Between the Worlds about an ambiguous utopian revolution in the near future, like maybe next year. I'm going to end with reading a paragraph from that, from The Wood Between the Worlds. Finally came the day when we arrived at the wall. Everyone pressed foreheads. The family hummed together a song deep in the back of their throats. The forest quieted to listen. The song was a spell that went down like syrup. And the song called the crows, who arrived together. There was a crack of thunder, a squawk, and the crows rained gifts upon our heads, a magical and sometimes painful storm of key, bone, mica, twist of metal, button, pink marble, safety pin, gold hard pendant, lug nut. And we scrambled over the wall, and the fox leapt up onto the wall, sniffed the air, and followed. And there, on the other side of the wall, there they all were, the others, waiting. And the tight, grieving buds of our hearts opened, because here, on this side, it was raining too. Thank you.
I think this. Can you hear me? Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Micah. Thank you for giving me a shout out while I'm here. I want to break what I have to say up in two parts. So I'm going to start with someone else's words, and then I'm going to be in conversation with the beautiful art exhibit here, which I wasn't planning on doing this, but it felt very haunting. I was like, holy shit, are these 8 people in my brain? So I will end with my words, but I'm not sure if you all are familiar with Martine Sims. She is a publisher and an artist, and a critic. And so she crafted, I want to say maybe 10 years ago or so, the Mundane Afrofuturist Manifesto. And I sort of vacillate between being like, you know, super fantastic on a planet and then feeling absolutely mundane. And I do feel like when Black Girl Magic happened, I was like, why do I gotta be that magical? Why can't I just be mundane? Why can't I just roll out of bed with my head tie and just be me? So this is just the beginning of the manifesto. We did not originate in the cosmos. Lord Jesus. The connection between Middle Passage and space travel is tenuous at best. Out of 534 space travelers, 14 have been Black. An all-Black crew is unlikely. Magic interstellar travel and/or the wondrous communication grid can lead to an illusion of outer space and cyberspace as egalitarian. This dream of utopia can encourage us to forget that outer space will not save us from injustice, and that cyberspace was prefigured upon a master-slave relationship. While we are often othered, we are not aliens. Though our ancestors were mutilated, we are not mutants. Post-Black is a misnomer. Post-colonialism is too. The most likely future is one in which we only have ourselves and this planet. So I really enjoy this manifesto because of the mendacity of it. I think what it calls to attention is a kind of like, it's not cynicism, but it's a kind of anxiety that I feel, anxiety and hope that I feel about the future. And I hadn't really noticed this. Well, there are 2 moments I noticed this in my body. The first was when I went to Obama's inauguration, and I was on the mall, and I was jumping up and down, and I was holding in my pee because Lord knows those porta potties were just not the move. But people were hugging each other. It was like Hands Across America, and we're just jumping up and down. And I was like, and I had to stop myself. I was like, holy shit, these people thought they solved racism. And then I just started to get really paranoid after that. I was like, oh my God, people are gonna stop doing work. They got a black man, they're not gonna do anything about it. And so here we are today. The other time was in 2020 when I was watching, I think it was episode 3 of Lovecraft Country. There was, they were driving through a sundown town. Has anyone seen Lovecraft Country? Okay. When I had to keep pausing that show, and I wasn't hyperventilating, but I had to keep pausing that show because I was just like, holy shit, this could be tomorrow. I could not tell the difference between that America and this America. And that the fact that the fantasy that the black sister had when she turned into a white woman was just to have an ice cream cone on a bench, that blew me away. So I started to think about what an amended future would look like. And it brought me back to Martine Sims' the Mundane Afrofuturist Manifesto, which I think is probably the healthiest way for me right now in this moment to engage the future. Because if I put too much sparkle on it, and you know, sparkle is theater herpes. It just rubs off on the next person, and no one tells you you have it on you. I'm sorry for anyone who hears, you know, whatever. It's curable. There are pills. Listen, we all have some acyclovir somewhere in our cabinet. Cold sore, okay? What I was thinking about all the different ways in which the fiction or the speculative fiction that I'm writing is coming up very closely to reality. And in the many ways in which executive orders and the news is becoming like a Twitter feed for certain people. So you almost have to engage things in a very different way. So my speculative fiction now is wondering how people imagine the world. How did gossip or how did survival in very like micro and quotidian ways keep people sane? Because it is true. I mean, there's a finite amount of time that humans can be on this planet. Some of us are going to be here for 70. Some of us maybe over, probably 100 years. But some of us tap out. And I'm also realizing that sometimes at a certain point in people's life, they tap out and their energy has to get passed on to another person. So when I think about Amending Worlds, I am trying to think about how and in which way I can conserve my energy and pass along that to other people in healthy and wholesome ways so that we can like affect a kind of change that isn't jumping up and down at the mall because, Obama has been elected and then, 15 years later, everyone's, yelling and saying, oh, but he's just as bad as the rest of them. And I'm like, that doesn't really save the narrative of the human race. Like, he was never meant to be the savior. I don't think a lot of these sort of objects, and I'm considering him an object, sort of these objects of savior or of hope or things that people think are going to shape the future are the way in which we can go. So this is why I turn to sort of the mundane Afrofuturist manifesto often to think about the ways in which I can shape my speculative fiction, which is sometimes no longer speculative fiction, because as I was going through, or maybe it's a shared vision, because as I was going through the exhibits, one of the things I was noting was that there was a little bit of everybody's work that showed up in this novel that I've been dragging along. Girl, it was in my dissertation, that I've been trying to finish forever. So, for example, the World to Come from Tyler Rye. That was I think one of the first ones that really attracted me because even before I came to grad school, I wrote a screenplay that made it into like the Sundance, was a finalist for Sundance about seeds and thinking about the way heirloom seeds and GMO technology affects us. And then I was thinking about, there was another one where the sartorial practice, Whispers of Weir. And I was thinking a lot about the way in which the young artist was thinking about clothing and how the clothing was imbued with these memories of people. And sometimes you ask these questions about the future. And I love that the artist brought up the fact that manufacturing waste is one of the largest bits of waste that is polluting our world. And so in the spec fiction that I'm writing, I imagine a world, well, basically the world is kind of destroyed because of weather systems and the Caribbean disappears, but the only way that we can reimagine each other is through sartorial practices. So it's between like weaving clothes or imagining things that are missing. So this is why I'm building shoes. So I'm trying to ask the question of where do you wear in the diaspora? And in my novel, diaspora is actually, it's trademarked as diaspora because everyone's a diasporic subject. And at this moment, it's like we've moved past the Anthropocene, so we are in the diaspora scene at this point because there is no place in which people can actually be situated with some kind of stability because water is land, land is water, and all our molecules at this point are mixed up. So people are actually, they're modifying their bodies so that they can carry the earth with them. So these are the ways in which I am wondering about what is this kind of future we are building for ourselves. And when I go back to the Afrofuturist Manifesto, one of the things, and I mean, I know you mentioned something like you don't want to be in a dystopian world, but I feel like some people may already have inherited dystopia and they are already living in it. So I actually want to embrace a hot mess poetics, to take the words from Ronaldo. I do want to see what happens when there is a great unraveling, because I feel like what we are trying to hold together may not be what we need, but we are in the habit of doing something. We are in the habit of probably commending or recommending or giving praise to people, which is why we forget the problem. This goes back to Obama. Everyone's so excited for him. He gets such high praise. People forget the problem. People want to talk about Black girl magic. They forget about the mendacity, which is why I really love the Afrofuturist Manifesto. I could go on and on about everyone's exhibits, but I think I feel like I felt as though going through here was like walking through a family album of even my own writing about fiction, because there were things that were quite hopeful, but what I love that everyone was using materials that was quite mundane, and I really enjoyed the mix that Rowan, I loved a third person, because I was thinking about what is that third thing or that fourth thing that sort of is the interloper in a space or something that is not spoken for but that exists. So that absent presence or that present absence that's in our past, present, and our future. What are these sort of objects that we carry with us that can identify us as humans? And so I will end with a reading. So I don't actually even know who is saying this in my novel, but I used to work in a genetics lab, so I was pre-med before my parents wanted me to be a doctor. I did become one, but not the one they wanted. It's kind of the useless one. So like, I have to be careful on the airport when they say, oh, you're a doctor. I'm like, yo, no. If this kid throws up with these peanuts, I'm not the one. Okay. So the novel is called Poco Más, which is, it means like a little bit more in Spanish, but it's also post-colonial masquerade. And it's also asking the readers to do a little bit more. So it's all these little things, whatever. So I think, I'm not sure, but I feel like when I was writing this, I was like, oh, I'm from the Bronx, so like it's gonna be Spanish. And then I was like, oh, but I have like an indigenous aunt from Guyana, and I was like, oh no, but I keep forgetting that I'm half Indian as well, because when I walk into a room, all people see is black. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm writing, these are my molecules talking. So I think this is just my molecules talking, because my main character's name is Fleur, which is fungible, labialized, ex utero routine. They are a collection of cells that were scooped up off of out of the sea and spun down in a centrifuge. So these are molecules that are speaking. In the solipsistic haze of all of our gazes, we were washed away in warm hurricane blood and tears raining. Its marine eyes on me, you, our sunshine swimmers, flooded pools blue, breath, breathe, struggling fish lungs, full doubt of me, you, our mattress, crib, tree, house, salted water, altar, cursing oraciones, gaining momentum towards me, you, our aqua descent, savage, salvage, fleshy flowers rot, blooms in me, you, our breed, bread, glittering plastic-wrapped family photosynthesis. Now the soused earth making brief interiors for me, for you, our last history of our cells, swimming, splitting, flecks of life, wide awake, across the rims of a soft cupping, inside the bladder of a syringe, underneath the hum of a recirculating bath, minimizing the shock of our leaving our old bodies and sharing our new matter, ruptured picnidem, traveling beneath man's boats. We will matter. We could be salt or sugar. We could be vegetal or animal. We could be endocytosis or exo. We could be XY, a plane or a point with microscope eyes on aloe. Enzymatic and serologic applications are just old instructions given to us by new scientists in many languages. We are aliquoted for such things as. However, it has always been our inhuman literacy and indecipherable movement that prevents us from rupturing under such human conditions. And that's the beginning of the piece, because I also, in thinking about Martine Sims, am questioning the category of human quite a bit. And I did not want to start with my theoretical philosophical hero, Sylvia Wynter, because she is quite dense and deep. But I will say one of the things that she says, and I'll leave you with this quote. She says that we are all, I'm going to say it real slow. We are all semantically, neurochemically activated, opiate rewarded storytelling. I'm going to say creatures, that's my word. Basically, what it means is that we continue to perpetuate stories that give us rewards, opiate reward us, right? And so we are semantically, neurochemically activated. So if we keep telling particular stories, that's the way our future is going to be shaped, and that is how the human is being shaped. So I'm kind of trying to disinvest in the human with a capital H at this point for my future.
I didn't actually know why Carla invited me, but now I kind of get it. So I think I'm here because my vision, my social vision doesn't involve mountaintops, but it does involve connection. So my rejection of transcendence is rooted in my rejection of the settler colonizers' life versus death, heaven versus earth or hell, their dreams of immortality and infinity, their splits that I see as the source of suffering. Witness evil Elon's Occupy Mars mentality. So I'm reading from a very short essay that was published in a 2023 volume called Deep Horizons. And in that essay, I advocate the idea of good dying as a rejection of that worldview and the suffering it unleashes for humans and the planet, that life versus death, heaven versus earth. So a historian of science said to me recently, "But Kim, everyone is afraid of dying." That's just not so. James K. Rao, also a graduate of UCSC at the University of Victoria now, writes, quote, "Transforming fear of death is politically vital. We need to stop having fantasies of control and infinity that feed supremacist ideologies and cause humans to do unjust things in the world. We need to confront the reality of death. This is critical for personal and global well-being. The speculative I address is a future and a present past for some of us in which life is death is life, and that is the title of this short essay. I will not tweet again the hashtag of death cult in my heckling of the US white supremacist state, despite its punch and its political salience. It contradicts the rich and varied ideas that I have about death and its multiple valences, ideas demonstrated rather than preached to me, especially during the first half of my life as a Dakota person. So let me tell you a story. In the spring of 1995, my great-grandmother took several days to die. Leaves on lush trees danced in breeze and sunlight outside her orderly room in our small town hospital. Having lived with terminal cancer for several years, her strong body was finally shutting down. She was 89. She outlived my great-grandfather by 26 years. He died Valentine's Day, 1969, when I was 4 months old. I was the first and only great-grandchild he ever saw. I was told that great-grandpa asked my mom to bring me over every day to see him. Granny spoke of him with total love and devotion. She laughed at his jokes every time she recalled stories about him. When he died, Granny poured so much love into me. But her heartbreak went deep. She outlived 3 of her 4 children and had wanted to go for a decade. She was, by the time of her death, our oldest tribal member. In her last days in hospital, she groaned when she woke, "Oh, God, I'm still here." Or she spoke memories of her long life before she slipped again into unconsciousness with increasing doses of morphine. Granny was the matriarch of our 5-generation family. Her memories were also about us and our lives and the lives of other ancestors and relations, and even white families in that South Dakota prairie town. Granny was never alone in her hospital room. The tribal casino catered food as they do for such monumental events. They delivered trays of sandwiches and pots of coffee directly to the hospital room and laid it out on a table. In those 3 days she was passing, there were at all times anywhere from 2 to 12 people in her small room, unless the nurses were changing her sheets with her in the bed and they asked for privacy. During those days, not unlike our traditional 3-day Dakota wakes, there were tears and many stories and much laughter. All of the nurses in the hospital were white. Our town was organized on a red-white divide in those days. It's more diverse now. One nurse commented that it was always like this when natives were dying. The family would be packed into the hospital room. No one dies alone. Down the hall, an old white man died alone the day before Granny did. That had prompted the nurse's comment. Of course, it's not true of all white people who die in our town, but it's also not uncommon, that inability to face death. Granny had grown up in a Catholic school before she married my Presbyterian great-grandfather at 17, but I only found that out when I was 12 years old, when one day she cursed the Catholic Church and forbid me to enter it as a guest with my friend. I was shocked. I hadn't known she was Catholic. It was clearly a source of pain for her. Granny never cursed. My great-grandfather, like our extended family to varying degrees, also participated in Dakota traditional practices. Granny professed to be a Christian, but I never saw her enter the Presbyterian Church except for funerals. She was also silent about our participation in Dakota ceremonies. But in her last hours, as she rose up into and sunk again below consciousness, she saw that little man in the corner near the ceiling. He was the same spirit my great-grandfather saw when he was dying. A holy person in our family who had been there for both of their deaths told the rest of the family that the little man was there to meet Granny and help her over. After my University of Alberta Native Studies colleague, Jessica Kolopenik, I prefer to call so-called spirits energetic remains. I like Jessica's term better than spirit for all of the reasons my friend David Shorter at UCLA gives in his simply titled article, Spirituality, and David's also a HISCON grad. Here's a little quote from David. Across time and place, we have reason to doubt that spiritual gets to the material, collective, and non-dichotomous ways of living in the world, often obscured by non-Indigenous concepts of spirituality. In the very long history of this continent's habitation, Native people were relating socially across species and life forms in material ways and for practical reasons. My great-grandmother was there from the first day that my newborn flesh exited my mother's body, and I dropped into this world. It was a gift to witness the very moment Granny exited this world. We are born into the hands of our ancestors. It is good to hand ancestors over to the next world. 3 aunts and I could feel it coming. We sat quietly at her bedside the last few hours watching. My chin rests on my laced-together fingers, my elbows on my knees, leaning forward, my eyes fixed on Granny's breathing. I would not take them off her. Then 1 second she breathed in and she never again breathed out. What about my great-grandmother's energetic remains? One of the aunts was home in Granny's house the evening after her death. Granny's perfume began wafting through the rooms. White shoulders, remember that one? In the months after her death, Granny visited me in dreams. She didn't know she was dead at first. Eventually, she did know, and she was, as they say, at peace. It is a very special treat only once every few years now that she visits me, or I visit her. We meet in my dreams in her little house on the prairie, and she is always serene. There are several unfortunate cliches about death. He gave up the struggle. They succumbed. Maura O'Connell sings a tune that I love, but I disagree with its lyrics. There's no good day for tears. There's no good day for dying. It was indeed a good day for my great-grandmother to die. Our tears were good. They were produced in part by her profound and fitting departure from a life lived with us. Her life and her death were a gift. Another elder in my kin network passed away recently at home with my daughter and his eldest son, her father, holding his hands. He refused to go to the hospital with its pandemic regulations where he would die alone. Grampy looked smilingly into Carmen's and David's eyes while he breathed his last breaths. His too was a good death. His descendants shared with him that profound moment of transition. His son and granddaughter handed him over. Death comes to all of us as it should. Life is death is life. I understand and share an aversion to suffering. Aversion to the possibility of a good death for all of us dismays me. Settler society fights, then laments specific deaths and excuses others. Instead, let us consider the differences between good and bad deaths of diverse beings by speaking precisely of specific deaths. We might then avoid flattening the difference between lives whose flourishing is facilitated and lives disallowed flourishing. I am not referring to number of years lived, but to a broader idea that could include that. I'm concerned with the fact that some lives are choked, ended in suffering by the actions of individuals and structures who in a bad way feed on the energetic matter of relations, human and other than human, animal and plant relatives, and energy too that should be left in the earth. Which deaths happen well? Which deaths happen terribly? In this moment, many conversations about death center COVID-19. This was written in 2021. But the pandemic both highlights and obscures a system of uneven and bad dying that helped facilitate this virus in the first place, and that facilitates other ongoing epidemics. Tuberculosis, malaria, and other epidemics that affect primarily the poor and non-white attract less attention and generate far less outrage than COVID-19, a disease which the privileged whites can readily imagine taking their own lives. Still, COVID deaths, like those of other epidemics, do tend to be extracted disproportionately from vast numbers of humans who were already made killable, to use Donna Haraway's words, by the vicious structures and actions of the gluttonous wealthy. This virus may seem unusual, but it slots nicely into the pre-existing system, including the settler colonial imagination that downplays the mutually sustaining relationship of life and death that regards death as failure, the domain of the weak, an aberration that fights death like hell for some and excuses it for others. Of course, settler state COVID-19 responses protect wealth more than they protect the vulnerable. But more than that, they reflect too much life-seeking by the relative few, those who extract more energetic matter from the planet than is their due. Those privileged few stretch their own mortality by foreclosing good living and good dying for the many. They despise the idea of death for themselves, but assure death, bad death, for so many others. They are actually life eaters. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Whoa. So one question I wanted to ask was, and some of you have been answering this already, but maybe let's riff on it a bit more. How might thinking, writing, or creating speculatively intervene in some way in our precarious present or the future? Can speculation be a reparative practice, and how might it be so? Acknowledging damage while fostering the possibility of change.
I remember this story that after 9/11, a lot of government officials brought in some Hollywood directors in a private meeting so that they could speculate on different ways that America might be attacked and figure out ways to not be attacked. I want to say, I think this is being filmed, but I don't want to name people. Anyway, there's someone from my alma mater who might have been in that meeting, famous director. And so I think for America at that time, that was reparative, and that was the way they were looking at their future in a very self-preservation way, an fictive way, in a very hyperbolic way, but not asking the right questions. So I think with speculative fiction, and this is what I've been telling some of my grad students, make sure you're asking questions of your questions, because sometimes your first question is just a great shot in the dark, but you have to ask questions of your questions because maybe that question is no longer relevant. And it might be self-serving. That first question that you ask may have nothing to do with the world and everything to do with you. And I think that's why that word that I really hate, solipsistic, ends up in the first line of this thing that I wrote, because I think writing spec fiction, successful spec fiction for me are people asking good questions about the questions that are out there already.
I guess I'm thinking about, I want to believe that speculating about the future can amend our future or amend our present. We're not in a period, there was a period earlier in 19th century where there was tons of proliferations of utopias and people were imagining, there's a lot of hope, and a lot of writers were imagining better futures, and we're not in that moment right now. But I think if we can imagine, I think we've got to imagine it. We have to imagine something better, and then try to act on it. What else are we gonna do?
Yeah, no, it's on. I don't think I'm not obviously a fiction writer, so I don't think I write speculatively. I think, and I also don't, really adhere to the idea of linear time. I think of an ever-changing present. So I think what I do is tell stories that I know to be the way the world is for me. And I hope that by telling the kinds of stories that I tell, that maybe some other people can have access to those kinds of stories. So I try to narrate the world the way in which I would like it to be for more people. And I don't think that's speculative, but opening something that's already here in pieces, bits and pieces for some of us, yeah.
Well, one of the things you bring up is that storytelling is a way of doing that maybe some other kinds of talking isn't. You know, that telling good stories, telling better stories, this is something Donna talks about too, telling better stories, stories that are better for the reality as you see it. And I'm just wondering, what is it about storytelling that enables that in a way that maybe some other kinds of discourse don't? Which verb was that?
I do think we have, somebody said this earlier too. I think I was just listening, so, and this is also new to me, what you both said. I do think we do hear these stories about, I think we have to have, before the world can be different, we've got to narrate it differently. I don't think the world comes first. I think the story comes first. And I think we keep telling these same, the stories I critique is US exceptionalism, is settler exceptionalism. You know, I think this is, I can't believe people believe this stuff. There's no evidence for it. But I feel like people need another story, a guiding narrative for how to be here and be together here. That's not US exceptionalism. And so I feel like I heard that from both of you a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Ditto.
Chatty, aren't we?
Okay, stories. I don't know, I was thinking of, I love your, listening to your little bit of your novel again. I love that story. I love that story of the woman created out of the flotsam of the end of the Caribbean, and how it's also calling back to Jane Eyre, and it's really rich. What is it about a story? That pleasure's deep, and I'm totally addicted. I don't know why. How do you feel about stories?
Well, when I was 10 years old, I got a microscope and a journal. And at the same time, and I remember my very first story that I wrote was about these bears that were trying to give their dog a bath. And then I went back and I started to read the things I wrote in high school. I don't know who I was. How many people go back and you read something like, who wrote that? Damn, that is good. Like, who is this person? I really want to be friends with me when I was 16, because I was writing some amazing haikus about like all the women who were like raped or in love by like Greek gods. And I was like, oh, what about the minor women who something happened to them in Apollo, his fifth conquest. And I was just I'm recovering narratives. I was like, who was I? And then I was writing about trans beings and trans people saving us. I was like, our hope is trans people. And I was like, trans wasn't even, I didn't even know what that was because I'm old. It was way back in the day. So when I look at my work in the past and I think about, I don't even know if it was a story or if it was a prayer or wish fulfillment or a grocery list. So I would invite everyone to go find something you wrote. The earliest thing you wrote. I wrote fan fiction. Does anyone remember Johnny Tremaine? Listen, let me tell you what. This is how old I am. It was on a typewriter. And you remember you used Wonder Bread to do a backspace as whiteout? Did anyone ever do that? You put the okay, so this is how old I am. So I wrote a fan fiction play for Johnny Tremaine because there was a black maid in the story, and I wanted to give her her own story, her own breakout piece. You know, like when you watch a movie and they like Alice, there's a spinoff from Alice, or, you know, Facts of Life. I feel like those stories that we wrote as children were like instructions for who we want to be now. So I think before you start paying money for like the guru to help you do X, Y, and Z, or download another meditation book on Audible, go find that first thing you can that you wrote and be like, who the fuck? Yes, bitch, yes. I am 5 and I said sleep. Sleep is fun. Go to sleep. Sleep some more. Maybe that's the story you need to tell your body and your molecules. Maybe if you're talking about friendship, maybe you need to reassess how you are approaching other people in the world. And I feel like some of the things that I didn't realize it might have been spec fiction, but I realized I was writing a lot about things in the margins, people who were forgotten, people who should have a story and didn't have one. So that's what I feel about story.
Well, we'd love to open up the floor to questions and comments from you all. And again, there's a microphone over there. If you have something you want to say or something you want to ask our speakers, please do so. No one's moving. I can keep talking a little bit more, but well, one of the things you just disavowed that you write fiction, but you sort of write creatively. I've heard you read those works, and I'm thinking a couple things. All 3 of you have some interface with science on the one hand and creative imagining on the other, and you all have a critical side and a creative side. Maybe they're not sides, but sometimes you speak in the voice of the critic. Sometimes you speak in the voice of the creator. Or not the creator, but a creator. The creator. And I'm just wondering how you relate to those different aspects of describing reality, right? Science is a way to describe reality. Critical discourse is a way to describe reality, and creative practice is a way to describe reality.
I think that, when I want to think about something, like even tonight, when I was like, what am I going to say tonight? I'm looking for a voice, and sometimes it sounds more critical, sometimes it sounds more creative, sometimes it's more of a mix of both. For me, that's something that kind of limberness of being able to speak in different modes is it's really fun. Although it does also create some problems. Like if I always feel like, God, if I was just a detective fiction writer or a romance writer, there'd be like this mode, and I'd just go to it and I'd think what I was thinking and I'd put in that mode. And for me, it's a lot more of a struggle. Like what mode am I going to use for whatever I'm thinking about? Is it going to be a novel, a story, an essay, a mix of something? And so that's both like a challenge, but also a pleasure too. So yeah, I think it's fun to be able to work in different modes, and I think everybody should play and try them. Try all the different modes and see. Your voice might surprise you. What comes out? What do you have?
Whenever I teach, I don't know why I do this, but on the first day of class, I always ask all my assigned students to raise their hands, because I was always assigned student sneaking into humanities class. So my father's like, "You're pre-med," and like little did he know I was doing all like the theater and all that. I could never show that to him I was like, "But yeah, I took orgo and Why did you take that English class?" I always would ask them, because what I appreciate about people who, I'm West Indian, so we had to like accountant, doctor, lawyer, all this in between stuff means nothing. It's about nomenclature. I find that when there are people who are focused on something in particular, like a microscope for a long period of time, and it's like a longitudinal thing, and you're moving the slides over and over, and there's a process about it, you have to tell yourself stories. There's like a kind of anticipation about the results that you're going to get, that you're writing down. Even the lab report is a kind of story that you're telling. And there's something about like the mathematician in your class, the computer scientist, someone who thinks they are meant to do something in one mode, that when you give them permission to do something else, or they share what it is that they're doing, they have that ability to pivot back and forth. So I'm always interested in tracking that, because I want to make sure, because I'm no longer teaching science. It was fun fact though, the last thing I TA'd at Santa Cruz was for the science department. I was a TA in the science department before I left here as a literature PhD. I want to make sure that the students who are sort of inheriting these tech skills, these STEM skills, have that kind of facility and agility and awareness of the humanists and of humanity. So that's why I always kind of check in with them. And I feel good. I think this is where my hope is. This is why I always ask them to raise their hand, because they took my class to begin with. So they're curious enough, whether they're trying to fill a GE or not. But I try to make it a welcoming space, so everybody, we can kind of dissolve the human with the capital H together in those 10 weeks and build something different together.
Do you want to say something?
About how you go between different voices? Yeah. I mean, I was going to say too, because I work with a lot of indigenous scientists, native scientists. Some of the best scientists are great storytellers. And I teach classes that are very multidisciplinary, and I always tell I'll have students from gender and women's studies and native studies, and I teach a big class called Indigenous Peoples and Technoscience, which is more of a science studies class, and so I'll get the science students taking it because they need some. In Canada, you have to take an Indigenous class, not like here in the US, because they all think they're indigenizing, and so I get all these science students taking my class thinking it's going to be an easy A because they're disciplinary chauvinists. But I do try to I like different languages. I've got Cree speaking students. We've got a lot of international students. And so I do really value speaking in different languages and theorizing in different languages. And I encourage the engineering students to speak their lingo, just define it for us, the biology students, the native studies students, so they understand that these are not like these transparent representations of what they're learning in the world, but these languages are social and cultural languages, and it doesn't matter if it's engineering lingo or if it's the lingo of your hairdresser or your mechanic or if it's Cree. These are all different languages, and they're really good languages for thinking about particular things, but they'll fail you sometimes. And so that's why you need these other languages in class, right? I like playing with language, so it's both a reflection of truth, but it's also, I don't know, we could have a whole conversation about that, about truth, right? I talk to them about, I think you're apprehending the world, and some languages are good for apprehending the world, and that word apprehension allows you to understand that your apprehension of it may not be a perfect reflection of what it is, but a particular language will give you a particular apprehension. And so I like these languages, different, I don't know. I probably went far beyond what you asked.
That was great. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. I see there's someone at the mic. Hi, welcome.
Hi. This is a question for Dr. Tallbear. Is that correct? Yesterday I was at UCSC for a talk on Palestine, colonialism, and genocide. I really learned a lot. I learned a lot about the place of colonialism and confusion that I had about anti-Semitism. But I wanted to ask you to address this interface. I'm someone that's trained, part of my life is being a death doula. And what you brought up about death was really interesting to me. And the whole thing of rehumanizing, now that's not even the best word, but making a change in death and how death is handled, in our culture at least, is important to me. And I wanted to have you say a little bit more about this link between our fear of death, colonialism, and what is astounding capacity as humans to dehumanize other humans and to deny their equality and humanity. And I think there's a link there, the fear that arises in so many people around death. So.
Yeah, I mean, the book that I cited briefly by James K. Rowe is called Radical Mindfulness. And I think, I'm not a Buddhist, but he takes kind of a Buddhist approach to thinking about cycles of life and death. And his intro is written by a First Nations person from BC. I can't remember the person's name. So, I mean, I think I am just beginning to articulate with what other people are doing who have thought about this more than me. It's just that I grew up in a family where people hear and see spirits, for lack of that's the word in English. And I just grew up knowing that there is discourse between, and I don't even want to say the living and the dead, because they exist. There are energetic remains, as Kolopenik says. So I think, but the James K. Rowe book, I think, gets into these dichotomies, right? This sort of speciesism and sexism and racism, these kinds of, did somebody use the word dehumanizing? I would say deanimating instead of dehumanizing, right? But deanimating people, some people below other people, some beings below other beings in order to justify making them killable, as Donna says, right? And I think, yeah, you could do a whole 2-day symposium on this, and I would not be the person to. But I would definitely recommend that book. I think there's a lot in that, and he's making the case that until settler culture learns to deal with death as not a failure, but also dealing with that question of good and bad death, right? Because there's early and difficult death, and for a lot of beings in the world, because there are some people that are taking too much life, right? Too much energy from the world. So, yeah.
Could you tell me the name of that book again? I don't think this is.
What's that?
Repeat.
Oh, it's called Radical Mindfulness, and then we'll keep losing my mic, and then there's a subtitle, but I can't remember what it is, and it's James K. Rowe, Rowe. Just came out this last year.
And the other book that you recommended, the woman who speaks about, you just quoted her.
Speak into the mic, please.
I wanted to also get the name of the other book, the person that you were talking about, how she spoke about. I lost it, darn it. You were just talking about.
Was it Donna Haraway when I said Donna's in the front row here?
Donna Haraway. Okay, great.
I don't know, Donna, where do you talk about not making killable? I've read so much of your stuff.
When species meet.
When species meet?
Yep.
It's in When Species Meet, and it has to do with the treatment of laboratory animals.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who theorized it in all kinds of really deep ways.
Yeah, your turn.
Hi.
Talk into the mic, please.
Okay, I will do my best. I wanted to ask y'all a little bit about balance, because we've heard a lot about some moments of joy butting up against moments of anxiety. And I think that as a critical thinker, I often find it difficult to lean deeply into moments of joy, because I'm always afraid of the dystopic space that's leaning heavily against that space of joy. So I'm wondering how I would love to hear you talk about how joy feeds your work, and how you let it inform your critical thoughts, and how you let it feed you in the moments when we've got a big Cheeto in the White House.
Well, I think, good question from former student. I think for me, I think joy is a decision. And here's a secret. Right before I teach, I kind of close my eyes for a minute and I say, lead with joy and total commitment. And I think that, and then I teach the class. And I think that can bring that to anything. And yeah, you can make a decision. If you move your body to, when you're feel joy, I think, lead with joy and then do something with your body that feels joyous. It will kind of shake out the dystopia and cut it off, yeah, for the moment.
I think maybe I'm just gonna go to I was a latchkey kid, so I watch a lot of TV. So Netflix is my thing. But someone has asked me, why do I watch period films a lot? And they're like, oh, those are colonizers. And I don't even understand why, but I'll tell you one thing. I have watched Pride and Prejudice. Let's start maybe from May. I won't even go from this year. I've probably watched all versions of it at least 20 times so far this year. And I will tell you, and I realized what it was. There's this one scene where Elizabeth gets 2 letters and she asks her aunt, can you go ahead to the church without me? I want to read my mail. And I was like, girl, this is utopia. Can I just have 2 pieces of mail that I'm gonna read all day long on this couch? And then I just started to think, do I have a relationship in my life for which this is generative and this is healthy and happy? And then I started to, that one scene, I have begun to world build joy in that space. So I wait for that scene to come where she just sits on the couch with those 2 letters from Jane to say that, Libby ran off with Wickham, and I'm just like, oh no, but it's like, but there is something about simplicity that I think we're being robbed of this moment. So when you were saying your brain is critical, I just think there's a lot happening that you think you can't free yourself, but you probably should free yourself from it. And I will just do a pitch, because these beautiful earrings that I'm wearing are from a movie called Sorry to Bother You. I think you all should watch it, because the love interest in the film tries to break free from that critical thing as well. And then also I'm finally reading the biography of one of my favorite writers, James Tiptree Jr., and it is amazing. So Alice Sheldon. So I'm reading about her. Love her.
We maybe have time for one more. Is that okay? How many of you were waiting? 3? Let's hear all your questions at once.
I'm very curious. I want to create experiences where people can collaborate in envisioning the future, and I'm wondering if you have any tips as professors of that.
Should we hear all the questions?
You mentioned that a child's dystopia involves a destruction and a complete reset. I'm wondering, within the context of a world where we're fearing generative AI sort of as a way of pushing us forward by accumulating mass knowledge, how can we, sorry, I have this part written down. How can this childish, destructive, utopian view be constructive within the realm of utopian fiction?
These are all great questions, by the way.
Yeah, lead me up well. I heard it acknowledged earlier about some communities being understood as existing within, post-apocalyptic space as it is right now, and I'm familiar with that within the realm of Native studies being an established discourse. And I was curious how you all think about, between the spectrum of your work, the difference between creating from a speculative place, creating from a fictitious place, and analyzing the cultural operations of communities that are existing within what you would understand as like.
You mean like planned communities?
No, like, I mean, a lot of Native communities can be, I mean, it's talked about, I'm thinking of like Kutcher Risling Baldy talking about post-apocalyptic fiction in the broader popular discourse as a way of interpreting like the existence of Native communities in the current moment, yeah.
Couldn't hear like the question. I heard everything.
Sorry. Yeah. So the question, I guess, is that how do you think about the difference between writing from a speculative place, from a fictitious place, and also that between that and working from a like academic or intellectual analysis place of communities that are existing in that post-apocalyptic area.
So there's working collaboratively, and I would just say, pick one that you want to talk about.
Carla, I feel like you have been working all year collaboratively with your creative group. You would be good to answer that.
Well, when you asked me that question, I thought about working with the group here on this exhibition, and we spent 10 weeks in the company of various guests thinking about some of the questions that are coming up here and some of the questions that you can read about in the brochure. I find a great deal of relief in feeling that who I am is not the most important thing, that whatever it is that's happening, it's a product of a lot of different people. And none of us are, this is my show and you're coming along with me. We're all trying to make something together. And each person's work is their own, but it's the result of a lot of talking and thinking together. So, I think it's the only way to go. I don't think we're going to get out of this in any other way. It's got to be collaborative. And we have to give it our all as communities specifically.
Maybe I'll just answer to Orion's question about AI and utopic. Is that what you're thinking about? AI and utopia in speculative fiction and.
Well, I was just thinking about how, sort of the advantage we have over AI is that we have childhoods. We're
Oh.
And you were talking about looking back at your childhood.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I love that. I love that. I should have said that myself to my students. The advantage we have is our childhoods. Yeah, I guess I would just say, again, from teaching this big class and knowing that some of the students were giving the experience over to AI. And some of them I noticed, some of them I didn't. It's really impossible to keep track of that. And so I think that we can offer this invitation to experience the world, and that every one of us needs to make a choice from now, all the time about what part of our lives we're going to give over to AI and what part we're not going to give over. And every time you use it, you're making a choice, and you're also giving. You're feeding it. So think carefully about what you want to do. And also, of course, using extraordinary amounts of resources at the same time. So in terms of, I think I'm just going to keep that for myself. The AI doesn't have a childhood in the way that we do.
We've got a lot of energy-devouring monsters in this conversation, I noticed. Okay, so I want to thank the three of you. This has been really great. And I'm going to pass it over to Irena and Pranav again, but join me in thanking our speakers.
Here's one.
Can you hear me?
Testing, testing. Oh, it works.
I think this works.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So first, thank you all for coming. My name is Irena Polic. I'm the Managing Director of the Humanities Institute. It's really wonderful to see you all. I'm going to hand it over to you, and then I want to say a couple more things.
Okay. And hi, I'm Pranav Anand. I'm the faculty director of the Humanities Institute. So we're directors together, consuls, I think.
Yes, and it's we have a lot of fun together. I want to thank Jim and Peter for supporting this event and this exhibition. I want to thank Carla for... you wouldn't believe how much work goes into all of this, before the event happens. I want to thank Jasmine for being an amazing dean and an amazing colleague and an amazing friend. Ginger, I don't know if you're still here. Ginger, thank you so much for hosting us. And then I want you to meet our amazing team, because sometimes you see me and Pranav on stage, you see us in newsletters, but really these are the people that make everything happen. I'll just go in order. Saskia Nauerberg-Dunkel is our Director of Research Programs and Communications. And she worked with Carla and the team all year to make this happen. Jessica Guild is our Manager of Events and Operations, and she does all these amazing events that we do throughout the year. Laura Martin is also a Research Program Manager at THI and does the Deep Read with us. And then Maya Rodriguez is our Development Assistant and really an essential part of our team. So all of you, thank you so much for coming.
And now, I mean, Micah said we get to choose what AI does and what we do. I really suggest you all join us out there. Is that right?
Yes, champagne is out there and cupcakes are back there.
And enjoy the material pleasures of being a person. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.
And
cheers. Oh, Jessica was...
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. And the exhibit is open until 10. So, keep the party going as long as you want until 10.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Happy birthday. Woo! Cheers.
Thank you so much.